just let me see who's on screen. I know Georgianne, I know Beatrice, Jennifer, people who have played with the pre-shot routine. For those of you who are new to this idea, the idea is that we practice having a recurring thought or recurring process so that our minds are not left to its own devices, Googling, thinking all the bad thoughts. So that's very sports oriented idea, that you have a routine that you repeat, and it helps you when you are nervous. It helps you when you start to doubt yourself, because you have that routine. So who wants to lead us off and tell us a little how your pre-shot routine has gone? Raise your hand, or physical or whatever hand. I'm looking around the screens. Anybody want to share something about? Georgianne, why don't you? You showed me your Post-it. Tell me.
So I have a problem with getting in my head, like all of us do. But I think sometimes I can get so in my head that I like just talk about, like, get into self-loathing. And so I have dealt with a lot of tension in my singing, just kind of like balled up emotions, and I've not felt the need to or felt as released as I wanted. So I wanted something that would give me a sense of openness for communication, but also openness of like the mechanism. And so the idea of, Bel Canto Bootcamp is to like unlock our techniques so we can unlock our imagination, right? And these are 3 things that for me help me unlock my imagination and remind me, even if I'm singing, something horribly sad, like what a joy it is to be practicing and singing, regardless of the circumstance. Not to always like be like a Pollyanna and be like, it's so great to be singing, because like sometimes practicing sucks a lot. But it's a joy to kind of be in exploration mode and practice that way.
This is fascinating for those of you who are in the fall. Like, the fall session has already assembled on Facebook, and we have already assembled the practice group. So we invited people to just post videos of themselves singing whatever, so that we can get to know each other. And I was struck by one really wonderful mezzo who posted herself singing Regata Veneziana of Rossini, and in her little introduction talked about how it's not so recent, but that she remembered that she felt so much joy in that performance. So that is what she wanted to share, and that she hopes to find that again. And that's very much a huge part of like what we're trying to do, is like you can find joy if you are clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish. One of my very favorite young tenors, once in a coaching, really looked so horribly sad, and I was like, I know you love to sing, what's with your face? And he said, if you don't know what you're doing, it's not fun. And that, I think, is a big thing, right? People doubt themselves, they doubt their process, they doubt that they actually know how to sing, and then people tell them to have fun, and they're like, that is not possible. So when we talk about like finding joy in our process and repeating our process, we in no way say that that is a way to pretend that you know if you don't know, right? So I think that is the most important thing for us to think about as we start tomorrow, is that the technical, or as Rotella calls it, the training mode. When we are going to be in the training mode, it is going to be very much about like getting clear about what it is we want to do. In my experience, a lot of singers, when you really sit them down with a glass of wine, I think everybody on this call, we have a couple of high school students. I don't see her here. If you're listening, Laura, no wine for you. But if you're sitting down with a glass of wine and you really think about it, and you think about, why am I nervous on stage? Why do I get in my own way? And then you ask yourself this question, do I really know what I'm doing? Like, when I'm in my practice room, when I'm with myself, do I know what I'm doing? If the answer to that is really yes, then there is something else at play. But for a lot of singers, the answer is really not really. Sometimes a good thing happens. Sometimes I can find my chest voice, but sometimes I can't. Sometimes I can find the top of my voice, sometimes I can't. And so that is really where we're going to try and break our work down, really, that we're really clear about how we are doing and what we are doing and how to get better at it. And then you play the game, right? Like Rotella says so great that somebody who is not a perfect golf player can still find joy if he plays the game that he has. You play with what you have, and it's okay if it's not perfect, because you're never going to be perfect. Yeah. I think a big thing is, and I talk a lot to the teachers. There are quite a lot of teachers in our group, and we love having them because, you know, it's when they say, we were talking about like fishing or giving somebody a fish or teaching them to fish. Now, if you're teaching somebody who teaches someone to fish, now you're really talking, right? Now you're really in the business of really spreading around good information. A big part of this is that we don't ask of ourselves or of our students to sing things in public that they cannot sing. Don't have stuff in your audition package that you cannot sing. If those notes are not comfortable for you, it cannot be there. And I think that we have a lot of built up angst in our lives if we do this terrible thing to put ourselves on stage to do something we cannot do, right? So those are the things that we want to think about, like, what can I do? Rotella says, play the shot that you know you can play, not the one you think you ought to be able to play, right? That's a problem in education, in schools, where you have to do certain things. And so we're basically going to try and stay in that mode. He also has this great thing when he says that when you really understand that this is something you cannot do, that is not negative thinking, that is honest thinking. Like lying to yourself is not going to help. So there is this thing that's called choking. So what happens when you really do know what you have to do, but then you choke. So for those of you who have not read Rotella, the reading of the day today is about choking. So this is for you if you are not able to deliver what it is you know you can, right? So he says, a golfer chokes when he lets anger, doubt, fear, or some other extraneous factor distract him before a shot. Distracted, the golfer then fails to do one or more of the things he normally does. He fails to follow his routine. So you get nervous, you get apprehensive, and then you don't do the routine that you have trained, particularly your mental routine, which, as we talked about last week quite in detail, has to do with focus on the target, right? Like really audiating, really imagining perfection, and then releasing your body. Like that ability to really, truly stay focused. He forgets his game plan, right? Like what was your plan to go through it? Yes, great, thank you, Saori. It's on page 171. He fails to accept his shots. Please remember, Rotella says the last step of a great routine is acceptance, because it's not always going to be perfect, right? Super, super important thing for us to get. Quite often under pressure, a distracting doubt or fear turns on the conscious mind, that conscious mind which judges yourself. The golfer stops trusting his swing. He starts going through a checklist of errors to avoid, right? You see yourself on stage doing that, or in a very important audition, don't do this, don't do this. These are the errors. He gets tight and he gets careful. When he is tight and careful, his body must work against gravity, rhythm, and flow. Now he is not flowing. His muscles get spastic, his feet get stiff, and he loses his natural grace and tempo. He hits a bad shot relative to his ability. So you can do something, but you don't do it. And this is why the process part of what we do is so important, right? Very, very crazy important idea. While I'm linking to that is how you are going to, and this is what I want you to think about at the moment. So how many of you were amazed when he was talking about the relation between the training and the trusting mentality, right? So training and trusting mentality, let me just look around who's joining us. I'm talking to page 2 for a while. The training and the trusting mentality is super important for us to understand. A lot of the work that we will do, like when you read posts for the next 11 weeks, -2, right? 2 weeks you get off. It's going to be a lot about like the training mentality. These are things you have to do. These are things you have to learn, right? And those are things that are important to know. It's knowledge. It might have to do with changing some habits, learning some new habits. But then he says, in order to really be able to trust that, you have to practice in the trusting mentality. And that is really kind of wild idea, right? Normally we are told that you practice, refine your technique, and then you go on stage and trust it, right? Then young singers say to me all the time, I don't trust it because I don't perform enough. I don't even sing enough auditions, right? In the world that we live in now, there are less and less auditions. When I first came to the States, people would sing 7, 8, 9 auditions in a week all the time. They got so used to it. That has all changed in the last 10 years. You don't sing that many. So the idea that you can sing 5 very important auditions in a season and just trust yourself then, doesn't make sense, right? Because as Rotella says, your mind will go to the dominant thing that you have been doing most. So if you have spent most of your time breaking yourself down and taking your process apart, that is where your mind will go when it is under pressure, right? And so this paragraph, I think, this is the part of Rotella that made me pray at his feet, because I never really understood this before. You must spend at least 60% of your practice time in the trusting mentality. This is page 198. This means, in general, that if you hit 100 balls in a practice session, at least 60 should be hit in the trusting mentality. This isn't easy, because it requires that you shut your mind down, except for thoughts of target and routine. Please remember, it always goes back to target and routine, not just be happy, right? It's like, what am I supposed to do and what is my routine to do that? It is not just like a euphoria of happiness or I don't care. The second an imperfect shot leaves your club face, you will confront the temptation to evaluate and criticize the swing that produced the imperfect shot, to rake another ball up and try to fix the problem. This, my people, is where you spend most of your lives. Every time something goes wrong, you're like, oh, that wasn't right, and then you try to fix what went wrong. If you cannot learn to resist this temptation, your practice time will be less productive than it should be, and you will never be as good as you can be. And this is kind of revolutionary, that you can be so clear in your process and how you have to practice, that you can accept the bad shots if they come because you're not perfect, but continue to practice that process. Somebody talk to me and tell me just how friggin' hard that is. I'm not even a singer. I just know how hard it is. Yes, Alice.
I think something that's been challenging for me with this concept has been when you're trying to incorporate new technical ideas into your practice, and how do you put those into your practice kindly when you aren't, when they are new things, and how to do that and still be in the trusting mentality. That's been a little challenging for me.
Super hard, and like almost everything, Rotella always has an answer for that, right? He says, so he talks about amateur golfers a lot. He says that if you only have X number of lessons, then the golf pro will think that he needs to fix everything in 1 hour. And most of you go through that kind of voice lesson. You only have so many voice lessons. So your teacher like gives you as many possible things. You know, you sing one phrase and you get 17 ideas. And the fact of the matter is that the brain cannot really like incorporate like that, right? So he says the best thing you can ever do is like to give yourself the commitment and the time to change things, and change one thing at a time, right? In the summer session, we had many meetings with mentors when they were like, oh, well, you know, they're now trying to sing legato, but God knows there's no music happening. And I would be like, just step back. Like, we cannot get somebody to get his mind around how to truly connect two notes and then be like, well, now remember, you must be musical as well. You have to cut yourself some slack so that you learn those things. That can be really boring and frustrating if you don't really understand what that thing is. So that is the important thing. That is what we're here for, and that is what we really try to do, is be very, very specific. And that's why we have practice groups, and that's why we have mentors that you can tag and be, okay, I try this, but I don't understand, or it doesn't make sense, right? So it's all, the work that we do very much is based on that idea that we try to be as clear as possible about what it is you have to do. You have to internalize that, and then you have to practice that idea, just like the ballet dancer goes to bar class. Ballet dancers don't go through their routine of pliés and then, you know, when one is not perfect, stop themselves and chastise themselves for doing one imperfect plie, and then try to like recreate and be like, well, I just don't know how to do a plie, and now I have to like, is an entire like disaster of character, right? You don't want to be in a disaster of character when you don't do something great. You keep staying in that process. It does mean that you need to have good information about what it is you're trying to do. Anybody else want to talk about like how hard that is? Let me go and look on the other page. How hard it is to really just stay in that trusting mentality. Do I see any hands? Jory, what about you? You've been playing with this idea for a while, and I know that you're like into Rotella.
I am very into Rotella. I have to admit, I'm not done yet, but I just see that as an opportunity to enjoy it some more. But I think I've been having some interesting revelations, even in the parts that I've read so far, of just like having had the same thing told to me a million times, but then the way he puts it, suddenly it clicks. Yeah. And this trusting mentality is like, this occurred to me even just now, like with all of this and thinking about it in the last week or two, as I've like tried to get back into practicing more, even for my church job, like, who am I doing this for? I'm not doing it for anyone but myself. And that's why I want to spend time doing my 1-note exercises, doing 2-note exercises, and that trusting that doing that will eventually transfer into the work. I'm not saying it's not really hard and that I haven't had days where I'm like 15 minutes is plenty of practice for today, but I think that it's about doing it because it makes you happy, which he talks about, like that it's not for anyone's sake but your own. And the other thing that I saw that I just read today that I loved was about how courage is fear turned inside out. That you can't be courageous if you weren't afraid first. And that mentality, there are so many sentences in this book where I just want to like scratch out golf and put singing, or scratch out golfer and put singer. But I think about times when I've been going into the negative thought thing is so powerful. Just like to think don't do something means your brain is just going to take the don't part out and then just make your body do the rest.
Right.
And fear is what motivates don't thinking.
Right. I think it's for those of you, I've had through the years that I've known this book, which was, I don't know, Yvonne didn't write the date in front of the book when she bought it, but I have read it so many times. It has like little thingies in. Now it has like highlighter in it. Every time I'm going to talk about it, I read it again, and I never get bored with it because, like all truly great things, it's really simple. It's truly simple and clear, and you can really get it. Before we close this off, I want to say something about what he talks about competitors, because I think that we all grow up thinking of our business as a competitive, cutthroat business that you have to have thick skin for. And we talked about it like in our Ubuntu thing, that it's so easy for us to be like, well, you have to be hard on yourself because everybody's going to be hard on you, and you know that there's a kind of self-abuse and abuse of others that happens in our business all the time. And that's really something that we're trying to fight here. And I think that in that way golf is very much the same. When he says that when we think about competitors, when a golfer thinks about competitors, his first opponent is the game itself, because it is so hard and it's unforgiving, and our game is the same. I know many people who glommed onto music at the end because everything else was easy in their lives. Very smart people. It was like, I could always understand math, I always could do this, I could always understand. And then there was this thing that it was just like a little out of my reach. I have so many friends that that's true for, right? So firstly, like, your first opponent is the game. The second opponent is yourself and your own mind, and how you don't set yourself up for success. And then he says, and I think that that's true in our business as well, that if you play the game with a good attitude and you manage to go out on the course and do the best you know how to do, all golfers at the end of the day is happy with that, whether they win or lose. And I think that that is a good attitude for us to have. I love the chapter that starts with him talking about how how golfers enjoy helping each other, you know, and how they're like, well, aren't you afraid that somebody will know more than you and then will like have, no, that is a shitty attitude that nobody in the world should have. Good singing isn't a secret. If you have a good exercise, you shouldn't like hide it under your bed, right? Our world becomes better when we all become better and we all enjoy that, and that lifts our spirits. So that is in